As the days continued to pass on the ranch, Emily and Jacob's bond only grew stronger. The quiet moments they shared, sitting together on the porch or working side by side in the fields, became the foundation of something deeper than either of them had expected. They had begun this journey as two strangers, each carrying their own burdens, their own fears of being judged. But now they were becoming partners in every sense of the word, learning how to love and accept each other's flaws, not in spite of them, but because of them. The ranch, once a place where Emily had felt like an outsider, now felt like home. It wasn't just the land that had become familiar to her. It was Jacob. His presence was a comfort, a reassurance that no matter how hard life got, they would face it together. She had come here to escape the harsh whispers of her past, but now she realized that the past no longer mattered. She had found something real, something lasting. Jacob, too, had changed. He had always prided himself on his independence, on his ability to manage the ranch alone despite the challenges his injury presented. But with Emily by his side, he had learned that it wasn't a weakness to lean on someone else. She hadn't come here to rescue him. She had come here because she wanted to be with him. And as he watched her work tirelessly on the ranch, seeing her care for the animals and the land with such determination, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She didn't see him as someone broken or incomplete. She saw him for who he was. A man who had been through hardships and still kept going. A man who had the strength to love despite his fears. One afternoon, as they sat together in the small garden near the house, Emily looked at Jacob and smiled. It was a simple smile, but it held so much meaning. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be loved, to be accepted without question, without hesitation. Jacob had shown her that love wasn't about perfection. It was about finding someone who understood your struggles and was willing to face them with you. "Do you ever think about the future, Jacob?" Emily asked, her voice soft but filled with curiosity. Jacob glanced at her, his eyes thoughtful. "I think about it a lot more now than I used to," he replied. "I used to think the future was just about surviving, about getting through each day. But now I see it differently. I see a future that's worth fighting for." Emily's heart fluttered at his words. She had come to the ranch hoping for a fresh start, but she never could have imagined the kind of life they were building together. It wasn't easy, of course. There were still hard days, days when the weight of the past seemed too heavy to bear. But they had learned how to lean on each other, to find strength in each other's presence. "I never imagined I'd find someone like you, Jacob," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've shown me that I don't have to hide anymore, that I don't have to be ashamed of my limp. You've taught me that it's okay to be imperfect." Jacob smiled, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "And you've shown me that love isn't about being perfect either. It's about being real, about being honest. I'm not the same man I was when we first met, Emily. You've helped me see that." As the weeks turned into months, Emily and Jacob continued to work the ranch together. They became a well-oiled team, each of them understanding their roles but also supporting each other when things got difficult. Whether it was tending to the animals, repairing the barn, or gathering the harvest, they worked side by side, their connection deepening with every task. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the orange glow casting soft shadows on their faces, Jacob turned to Emily with a serious expression. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Emily," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Emily looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" Jacob took a deep breath, his hand reaching for hers. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build a future together, a future where we don't have to hide, where we can be who we truly are, without fear of judgment or rejection. Will you marry me, Emily?" The words hung in the air, and for a moment time seemed to slow down. Emily's heart raced as she looked at Jacob, the man who had shown her what it meant to love and be loved, the man who had taught her that true strength came from vulnerability. She had never imagined that her life would lead her here, to this quiet ranch, with this man who had captured her heart in a way she never thought possible. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at Jacob, a smile spreading across her face. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Jacob's face lit up with a smile that could only be described as pure joy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close as they both reveled in the moment. They didn't need grand gestures or promises of perfection. They had found something real, something that would stand the test of time. The days that followed were filled with excitement and anticipation as they began to plan their future together. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was more than enough. The ranch, which had once felt like a place of solitude and hardship, now felt like a home. It was a place where love could grow, where two people who had been scarred by the world could find healing in each other's arms. The townspeople, who had once mocked Emily and Jacob, now saw them differently. They saw two people who had built a life together from the ground up, who had faced their challenges with courage and determination. No longer did Emily feel like an outsider. She was part of something bigger now, a community that had learned to respect her for who she was, not for her limp. And Jacob, too, had found his place. No longer was he just the one-legged rancher. He was the man who had won Emily's heart, the man who had proven that love didn't depend on what you looked like or what you could or couldn't do. It depended on what you were willing to give. As Emily and Jacob stood together, looking out at the land they had come to love, they knew that their future was full of possibilities. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but they were ready to face it together side by side. They had learned that love was not about being perfect. It was about being true to one another, about accepting each other's flaws, and about building a life that was stronger than anything the world could throw their way. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the ranch, they knew one thing for certain. They had found their home, their place of peace and their love, a love that would last, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The days on the ranch grew longer as the seasons changed, and with each passing day, Emily began to feel more at home. The harsh words from the people in the nearby town still lingered in her mind, but she was slowly learning to block them out. Jacob's presence, his quiet strength, and the steady rhythm of ranch life were beginning to wash away the insecurities that had once clouded her heart. As Emily spent more time with Jacob, working side by side on the ranch, she started to see him in a different light. What had initially been a simple arrangement between two strangers had turned into something deeper. She admired his ability to carry on with his work, despite the challenges he faced because of his missing leg. He moved with a certain quiet dignity, never drawing attention to his disability, yet always finding ways to manage the tasks with surprising ease. He never complained. He never asked for pity. In fact, he rarely spoke of his injury at all. At first, Emily had felt a strange mix of admiration and pity for Jacob. She saw how hard he worked, but there was also a part of her that wanted to help him, to make his life easier. She had wanted to step in when he seemed to be struggling, to offer assistance, but Jacob always pushed her away, gently but firmly. "I don't need your help," he would say, his voice calm and steady. "I can do it myself." But Emily had begun to see that Jacob's pride wasn't about refusing help. It was about maintaining his independence. He didn't want anyone to feel sorry for him, and he didn't want to be seen as weak. He had learned how to live with his disability, and in many ways he had become stronger for it. As time passed, Emily's respect for Jacob grew. She realized that he wasn't just a rancher, but a man with a deep well of strength and resilience. She also began to understand how much he carried with him, how much he had hidden from the world. He had lived through hardship, and yet he was still standing, still moving forward, never letting anything stop him. One evening, after a long day of work, Emily and Jacob sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the air was cool but not too cold. The stillness of the evening gave them both a sense of peace, a rare moment of quiet in their busy lives. Emily sat with her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She had been thinking about Jacob for some time now, wondering if he felt the same way about her as she did about him. It had been a slow realization, but now that she was here, now that they had spent so much time together, she couldn't ignore the growing feelings in her heart. Jacob turned to her, his voice soft but steady. "Emily, I've been thinking," he said, pausing for a moment as if searching for the right words. "I don't want you to think that I've been pushing you away on purpose. I've had my share of hurt in the past. I didn't want you to feel like you needed to take care of me. I didn't want you to pity me, and I didn't want to drag you into a life that might be harder than it needs to be." Emily turned to him, her heart racing as she listened to his words. She knew exactly what he meant. She had felt the same way about herself when she first arrived at the ranch, unsure of how Jacob would see her because of her limp. She understood his fear of being judged, of being seen as less than what he truly was. "I don't pity you, Jacob," Emily said, her voice firm and honest. "And I never have. I admire you. I've learned so much from you already. How to be strong, how to keep going no matter what. And I want to be here with you. I want to help, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because I care about you." Jacob's expression softened as he looked at her, his eyes filled with something that she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. In that moment, Emily realized that despite his rough exterior, despite his quiet strength, Jacob was just like her. Someone who had been hurt, someone who had spent years hiding their true feelings out of fear of being rejected. He sighed, a deep, almost weary sound. "I've been afraid too, Emily," he admitted. "Afraid that I wouldn't be enough. Afraid that you would see my leg as a weakness, something that would hold us back. But the truth is, I don't want to hide anymore. I want to be honest with you. I've been holding back my feelings because I was scared. Scared of losing you." Emily's heart swelled with emotion as she listened to him. She had never expected Jacob to say these words, to open up in this way. She had always seen him as a strong, silent man who carried his burdens alone. But now she saw something different. She saw the man behind the strength, the man who had a heart capable of love, capable of deep connection. "I'm not going anywhere, Jacob," Emily said softly. "I'm here and I want to be with you. I want to build a life with you here on this ranch. I've never felt more at peace than I do right now with you." The silence between them grew, but it was a comfortable silence, one that held the weight of everything they had said. Jacob reached out and took Emily's hand in his rough, calloused fingers brushing against her soft skin. "I didn't think I could feel this way again," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think I could let anyone in. But you've shown me something I never thought I'd find again. You've made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I can be loved even with all my flaws." Emily smiled, her heart full. "We all have flaws, Jacob. That's what makes us human. But I don't see your leg as a flaw. I see it as part of who you are, a part of your strength. You've been through so much and you're still standing. That's something to be proud of." Jacob squeezed her hand gently, and for the first time in a long while, he let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. In that moment, he realized that Emily wasn't just accepting him despite his disability. She was accepting him, all of him, for exactly who he was. "Thank you," Jacob said, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for seeing me, for who I truly am." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. She wasn't the girl with the limp, and Jacob wasn't the man with the missing leg. They were two people, two souls who had found each other in the midst of their struggles, and together, they were stronger. As they sat there watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. There would still be challenges ahead, still moments of doubt and fear, but she also knew that they would face them together. No longer would they hide behind their insecurities. They had each other now, and that was all they needed to begin a new chapter of their lives. The days passed slowly at the ranch, and as Emily settled into her new life, she began to notice the subtle differences between her life in the town she had left behind and her new life here with Jacob. The ranch was peaceful, isolated, and beautiful, but it came with its own set of challenges. There was the constant work to do, the animals to care for, and the weather to battle. But there was something else, something she hadn't expected: the whispers and judgments from the people around her. Emily had hoped that the West, with its wide-open spaces, would be a place where she could leave behind the judgmental glances and cruel words of her past. But that wasn't the case. The people in the nearby town seemed to find a new way to look at her, and it wasn't with kindness. One afternoon, Jacob and Emily went to the town to pick up supplies. It wasn't the first time they'd been into town together, but this time Emily could feel the eyes of the townspeople on her. It wasn't just the way they stared at her. It was the way they looked at her with a sort of pity, as though she didn't belong there. She had hoped that they wouldn't notice her limp or see her as an outsider, but that was impossible. The moment they saw her, they knew she was different. As they walked through the market, a woman stood in front of a fruit stand, whispering to her friend. Emily caught part of the conversation. "Did you see that? She has a limp." "What is she even doing out here?" the woman said loud enough for Emily to hear. Emily's heart sank. She had heard these words before, but it didn't make them any easier to bear. Her limp had always been something that set her apart from others, but in this new place she had hoped for a fresh start. Instead, she felt the same sting of judgment. Jacob noticed the uncomfortable silence that followed the woman's words, and his hand gently brushed against Emily's arm, as if to offer silent support. He didn't say anything, but his presence beside her gave her some comfort. As they continued through the market, Emily overheard more whispers, this time from a couple of men standing outside a general store. One of them was holding a bottle of whiskey, his voice slightly slurred as he spoke. "Look at her with that limp. What kind of woman would a rancher like Jacob want with her? She can barely walk. He deserves someone strong, not someone like that." The words cut deeper than she expected. She tried to ignore them, but the sting was unbearable. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. Here she was, trying to build a new life, and yet the old feelings of rejection followed her like a shadow. It was as if her limp had become a symbol of everything wrong with her, something that could never be ignored or overlooked. Jacob could see how much the words were affecting her. His jaw tightened and he clenched his fists. He wanted to say something to defend her, to tell the men to mind their business. But he didn't. Instead, he simply walked faster, guiding Emily past the men and out of the market. "Don't listen to them," Jacob said quietly as they walked. "They don't know you." But Emily's heart was heavy. She wanted to believe him, but it was hard to ignore the way people looked at her, as if she were a burden, a flaw that didn't belong in their perfect world. Every day it felt like the same cycle. She would try to stand tall, to ignore the whispers, only for the harsh words to follow her wherever she went. That night, after returning to the ranch, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being misunderstood. She sat on the porch, looking out at the quiet landscape as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sounds of the evening, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of the trees, were soothing, but they couldn't quiet the storm in her mind. Jacob joined her a little while later, sitting beside her on the porch swing. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he just sat quietly as if waiting for her to share her thoughts. "I don't belong here, Jacob," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "I thought I could start fresh, but it's like the whole world is still judging me." Jacob sighed, looking out at the vast land before them. "It's hard, I know," he said. "People can be cruel. But you have to remember, they don't know you. They don't see the strength you have. They only see what's on the outside, and that's not the whole story." Emily looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to be strong, to shrug off the cruel comments like they didn't matter. But the truth was, they did matter. It hurt to be judged for something she couldn't control, something she had lived with her entire life. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she whispered. "It feels like no matter where I go, I'm always going to be that girl with the limp. And I hate it." Jacob turned to face her, his eyes serious. "I know it's hard. But you have to understand something, Emily. That limp doesn't define you. You're not just a limp. You're a woman with a kind heart, a strong spirit, and the courage to leave everything behind to start a new life. Don't let them take that away from you." His words were kind, but they didn't erase the pain she felt. Emily couldn't help but feel as though she was fighting a battle she couldn't win. No matter how much she tried to ignore the whispers, they kept coming back, pushing her to question her worth. The next day, as they worked on the ranch, Emily tried her best to ignore the lingering feelings of doubt, but it wasn't easy. As they worked in the fields, she couldn't help but notice the way the other ranch hands looked at her, the way they seemed to avoid eye contact, as though they were uncomfortable around her. She wanted to fit in, to be accepted, but it seemed like every time she tried, something held her back. She didn't say anything to Jacob, but she could tell he was aware of the tension in the air. He was always watching her, always aware of when she needed help, though he never made a big deal about it. Sometimes when she stumbled or struggled, he would quietly step in and assist her, offering a hand without making her feel weak. But other times he just let her be, letting her face the challenges on her own, knowing that she needed to build her own strength. One evening after a long day's work, Emily found herself alone in the barn, taking care of the animals. She fed the horses, brushed them down, and cleaned their stalls, trying to clear her mind. But the memories of the cruel words from the townspeople lingered. She had worked so hard to prove herself here, and yet it felt like she was still fighting the same battles she had fought all her life. As she finished her work and turned to leave the barn, she caught sight of Jacob. He was standing in the doorway, watching her with a look of quiet understanding. "I know it's not easy," he said softly, "but you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're here because you're strong enough to be here, and that's all that matters." Emily looked at him, her heart heavy but filled with gratitude. "I want to believe that," she said quietly. "But it's hard," Jacob nodded. "I know, but you're not alone in this. You have me and you have this ranch. And together, we'll make it through." In that moment, Emily realized something important. While the world outside might never stop judging her, she didn't have to let it define her. She had Jacob, she had the ranch, and most importantly, she had herself. The journey to the west had been long and tiring, but as Emily stepped off the train and breathed in the fresh air, she felt a sense of anticipation and fear twist inside her. This was it, the start of a new life. She had traveled so far to reach this point, to meet the man she had corresponded with over the past few weeks. Jacob's letter had filled her with hope, and now it was time to see if that hope could become a reality. Jacob was waiting for her at the station, standing tall with his broad shoulders and a rugged look that made him seem like the kind of man who had worked hard for everything he had. His hair was dark and his face was lined with the years of hard work. But there was a kindness in his eyes, a softness that made Emily feel less nervous as she approached him. He smiled, and in that moment she felt as though she could trust him. "Welcome to the West, Emily," Jacob said in a voice that was deep and steady. He held out his hand, and though she had been nervous about meeting him, the warmth in his gesture made her feel more at ease. "Thank you," Emily replied, smiling as she shook his hand. The simple act of meeting him in person made everything feel real now. It wasn't just a dream or a letter. It was something tangible, something that could change the course of her life. Jacob led her to his wagon where a pair of sturdy horses were tied up and waiting. As they traveled from the station to the ranch, Emily couldn't help but take in the vast landscape around her. The land stretched out in every direction, with mountains in the distance and the sun slowly sinking lower in the sky. It was a breathtaking view, one that felt wild and free. It was different from the small town she had come from, a place where everyone knew each other and everything seemed to be confined within narrow limits. Here there was space, freedom, and possibilities. As they approached the ranch, Emily noticed how well kept it was. The barn looked sturdy, the fields were neatly plowed, and the house was modest but charming, nestled among the trees. Jacob clearly worked hard to maintain his ranch, but it wasn't just a place for him to live. It was his livelihood, his home, and the foundation for everything he had. She wondered what life had been like for him here, and whether he had always lived alone, or if someone had once shared this space with him. Jacob helped her unload her things and showed her around the ranch, explaining the various tasks that she would be helping with. As he spoke, Emily began to realize just how much responsibility came with managing a ranch. It wasn't just about caring for animals and working the land. It was about living in harmony with nature, solving problems and making decisions that affected the future. Jacob was clearly capable, but there was something in the way he spoke that made Emily wonder about his past. He seemed distant at times, as if there were things he didn't want to share. That night, as they sat down to dinner in the small but cozy house, Emily noticed something strange. Jacob had set his leg in a way that seemed unnatural, like he was trying to hide something. She thought she might be imagining things, but as they talked, she caught a glimpse of something that startled her. Jacob was missing part of his leg. It wasn't immediately obvious, as he wore long pants and was careful not to make it too noticeable, but there was no mistaking it. At first, Emily didn't know how to react. She had been so focused on her own limp that she hadn't thought to consider that Jacob might have struggles of his own. His missing leg, she realized, must have been the result of some kind of accident. But Jacob didn't seem to want to talk about it. And the more Emily thought about it, the more she understood that there was pain behind his quiet demeanor. She could see the way he moved carefully, the way he had set his leg in a way that allowed him to hide his injury. It was a protective measure, something he had done to keep others from asking questions or making judgments. As the evening went on, Jacob seemed to try his best to make her feel comfortable. He didn't mention his injury, and Emily, unsure of how to bring it up, followed his lead. But the silence between them grew, and she began to wonder if they had more in common than she had originally thought. Here she was, carrying the weight of her limp, and here he was carrying the weight of his own loss. After dinner, Jacob showed Emily to her room. It was simple but comfortable. The bed was neatly made, and a small window allowed the evening breeze to filter in. As she unpacked, Emily's mind raced. She had come here hoping for a fresh start, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she would find someone who could see past her limp. But now, with the discovery of Jacob's injury, she realized that their struggles might be more similar than she had ever imagined. She wondered if Jacob would judge her the way so many others had. Would he see her limp as a burden just like everyone else? The next morning, Emily woke early. She wanted to make a good impression, and she knew there was work to be done. Jacob had already started his day, preparing the horses for their morning ride, and she quickly joined him, eager to help. As they worked together, Emily began to notice the small ways in which Jacob's injury affected his life. He moved slower than she had expected, and there were moments when he seemed to favor his other leg, adjusting his weight as he walked. Despite his obvious pain, Jacob didn't complain. He simply went about his work, as though the loss of his leg was just another part of life. Emily admired his strength, but she also felt a pang of sympathy. She understood what it was like to have a part of you that made life more difficult. As the day went on, they worked side by side. Emily did what she could to keep up with the tasks Jacob set for her, but she could see that he was holding back. There were moments when he would offer help, but only in small ways, as if he didn't want her to see the full extent of his struggle. That night, after a long day, Jacob sat down in front of the fire, rubbing his leg gently. Emily sat across from him, trying to find the right words to say. She didn't want to make him uncomfortable, but she felt like there was something unsaid between them, something that needed to be addressed. Finally, Emily spoke. "Jacob," she began, "I saw your leg earlier. I just wanted you to know that I understand. You don't have to hide it from me." Jacob looked up, surprised. He hadn't expected her to bring it up. "I don't want your pity," he said quietly. "I'm just trying to live my life." "I don't pity you," Emily replied gently. "I understand what it's like to have something about you that others judge. I just want you to know that you're not alone." For a moment there was silence between them. Then Jacob smiled, a small, grateful smile. "I appreciate that, Emily. It's not easy, but I've learned to live with it." In that moment, Emily realized something important. She wasn't the only one carrying the weight of a hidden wound. Jacob, too, had his struggles, and in that shared understanding, a quiet bond began to form between them. It wasn't love yet, but it was a beginning of something that could grow into something deeper. Emily had always been different from the other girls in her small town. Ever since she was a child, she had a limp, the result of a childhood accident. While the other children ran and played, she had to move slowly, carefully, taking every step with extra thought. The limp, something she had never been able to escape, was a constant reminder of how different she was. It was a flaw that stuck to her, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. For years, Emily had been an outcast. Though the people in her town were kind on the surface, there was always the whisper behind her back or the sideways glance when someone thought she wouldn't notice. At the local market, the other girls would chat and laugh, their healthy legs carrying them effortlessly from one stall to the next. Emily's limp kept her on the outside, always looking in. Her heart longed for something more, a place where she could be accepted and loved for who she was, not judged for what she lacked. One day, after a particularly painful moment when she overheard some girls at the market laughing about her limp, Emily made up her mind. She could no longer stay in the town where she felt trapped. She needed a fresh start, somewhere far away where no one knew her past, where her limp wouldn't be the first thing people noticed about her. That's when she saw the advertisement. It was simple, a small ad in a magazine she had picked up during one of her rare visits to the bigger city. The ad was for a mail-order bride, a term that felt old-fashioned and distant. It was the kind of thing that seemed to belong to another time, something only seen in books or heard about in stories. But as Emily's eyes scanned the words, she felt a spark of hope. A man named Jacob, a rancher in the West, was looking for a wife. The ad was clear. He needed someone who could help run the ranch and care for the home. He didn't ask for beauty or youth, and there was no mention of perfect health. Instead, the ad was about partnership, about two people coming together to build something new. to face the challenges of life side by side. The ad struck a chord in Emily's heart. She had never known a love based on something so simple, yet so meaningful. She thought about it for a few days, unsure if she should take such a huge step. But the desire for change, for a chance at a different life, was stronger than her fear. She knew that she had to take the risk, or she would spend the rest of her life wondering what could have been. After much thought, Emily decided to write the letter. It wasn't easy, but she poured her heart into it. She told Jacob about her life, about her limp, and how it had affected her over the years. She was honest but hopeful. She didn't know if Jacob would want her, but she couldn't let that stop her. She signed the letter, folded it carefully, and sent it off, praying that it would reach him, and that he would feel the same sense of possibility that she did. Days turned into weeks. Emily didn't hear anything. Doubt began to creep in. Maybe Jacob had found someone else. Maybe he didn't want her after all. But just when she was about to give up, a letter arrived. It was from Jacob. The letter was simple, but it made Emily's heart race. He was interested, and he wanted to get to know her better. His words were kind, respectful, and understanding. Jacob told her that he had been through difficult times of his own, and that he appreciated her honesty. He had seen hard work and commitment in her words, and that was what mattered to him most. In the letter, he invited her to come to the West and meet him, giving her the chance to decide if they could build a future together. Emily was thrilled. It felt like a dream come true. For the first time in years, someone had seen her for who she was and was offering her the opportunity to start over, to live a life where she could be more than just the girl with the limp. She quickly responded, and within a few weeks she was on her way. The journey to the West was long, and every part of the trip felt like a step toward the unknown. As the train carried her farther away from everything she had ever known, Emily felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Could this truly be the fresh start she had dreamed of? Could she find happiness in a place so far from home? During the long journey, Emily could not help but think about what awaited her at the end. The idea of starting over filled her with both hope and anxiety. She was unsure of what to expect from Jacob. Would he find her limp a burden as others had? Would he see past it just as he seemed to have in his letter? As she traveled west, she encountered people who didn't hold back their judgment. Some people looked at her with pity, while others made harsh comments that cut deep into her heart. "You'll never find someone who will want you like this," one woman said with a cruel laugh when Emily had to ask for help getting off the train. Emily's heart sank. It felt as though every step of the journey was a reminder of everything she feared about herself. The other passengers, most of whom were healthy and strong, didn't understand her struggle. They didn't understand the weight of the years of rejection that she had carried with her. Despite the cruel words and the painful moments, Emily held her head high. She was determined to move forward, to prove to herself that she could find a place where she would be accepted, a place where her limp wouldn't define her. She thought about Jacob, the man who had reached out to her. His kindness and his letter kept her going, and she clung to the belief that there was a future waiting for her in the West, no matter how difficult the journey might be. When the train finally pulled into the small town near Jacob's ranch, Emily was overwhelmed. The air smelled different here, fresh and earthy, as though the land itself was full of new possibilities. She stepped off the train with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. What awaited her now? Would Jacob be kind? Would he truly accept her for who she was? As she looked around at the new town, the sun shining brightly above, Emily couldn't help but wonder what her new life would look like. Would she find acceptance here, a place where her limp didn't matter? Or would she be just another person judged for things beyond her control? Little did she know the man waiting for her at the ranch had struggles of his own, struggles that would challenge them both, but also bring them together in a way Emily had never imagined.